Thanks a lot, and of course, we're happy to answer any questions and have any kind of discussion you like. We're not rushing away, though you may have to rush away. So, and also, if any of you have gotten the book and we haven't signed it, we're happy to sign it, and I will be delighted to correct my 2 errors. And just now, reading to you, I discovered a 3rd error. So, yeah, that's life. And so maybe I'll correct the 3rd error as well. Anyone want to say? If I didn't encounter problems, I'd be dead, right? That's right. I can tell somebody was listening. So, anybody have anything to say? Really? No comments?
I have comments. Well, I love the reading. Thank you so much. Muito obrigado, Salgado. Muito lindo. Estou muito emocionado.
Muito obrigado por dizer isso em português.
And I have also a question I wanted to ask. How would you see yourself in the lineage of Brazilian poetry? ¿Cómo se ve você na linha da poesia brasileira?
Muito boa pergunta. Fala em inglês, porque as pessoas
Mas
precisam...
ele falou em inglês.
Tá. Então, como eu entendi? É porque eu estou aprendendo, começando aí. Luiz Fernando Valente, da Brown University.
Luiz Fernando Valente, who was for a long time the chairman of the Department of Portuguese and Brazilian Studies at Brown University.
Estabelece uma linhagem na poesia, a partir de um depoimento que eu dei, ele estabelece uma linhagem de uma poética apolínea, uma linha de poética apolínea na poesia brasileira.
After I gave a presentation at Brown, Luiz Valente wrote an article in which he argued that there is an Apollonian tradition in Brazilian poetry, and Professor Sepulveda's furrowed brow is quite appropriate, because you would think that Salgado is some sort of representative of a Dionysian tradition, and so Salgado was really pleased that a professor somehow saw it as Apollonian. And when you look at all these sonnets and all the wordplay, there's a very strong Apollonian element to all of his, even if there is violence, even if there is extreme of emotion and of suffering, there's plenty of controlled linguistic wordplay, homo ludens at work.
Da forma em que é colocado, ele percebe na poesia que eu faço, como na poesia de Drummond, que ele diz inaugurar essa linhagem, não uma contraposição de Apolíneo e Dionísio, mas um coroamento de Apolíneo como a purificação final, o grau mais alto.
Valente didn't present this as a struggle between the Dionysian and the Apollonian and the Dionysian, but rather as some sort of a culmination and perfection of the Dionysian in an Apollonian achievement, I believe, is what he just said.
Para isso ele se ancora em Nietzsche, na origem da tragédia. Então ele teoriza em função disso e começa essa linhagem com Drummond, em seguida João Cabral de Melo Neto, Mário Faustino e eu, que sou o atual seguidor deste caminho.
Quoting from the writing from Nietzsche's origin, Birth of Tragedy. I'm sorry, I was translating word for word. Big mistake. Birth of Tragedy, which is all about the Apollonian and the Dionysian. And by the way, Nietzsche was 26 when he wrote that absolutely brilliant study of Greek tragedy. Basing his analysis perhaps on Nietzsche, he went on to trace a lineage from Carlos Drummond de Andrade in Brazil through João Cabral de Melo Neto and Mario Faustino, and on to Salgado Maranhão.
So how much of the metaphors they're coming to bear in your poetry reflect the relationship between the oppressors in Brazil and the oppressed, particularly in the African and European conflict, and that's one. And the second one is that how much of American poetry, or say even African American poetry, it had any influence in your development, particularly because his poetry reminds me a lot of Audre Lorde and Yusuf Kolayaka.
Great. Who was the first you mentioned besides Audre Lorde? Okay, these are very good questions, but let me take them one at a time, okay? A primeira pergunta é, você acha que o conflito entre europeus e africanos, a escravidão e tudo isso, tem um grande papel na sua obra, sua digamos, a vida metafórica, poética metafórica, e também o conflito entre brancos e negros é uma parte metafórica de sua visão poética? Isso foi a primeira.
De certo modo, sim, em que pese o amaciamento de conflitos contrários no Brasil entre branco e pretos pela nossa forma de colonização.
Amaciamento.
Suavizamento, suavidade, suavizar. Os conflitos foram suavizados pela forma portuguesa de colonizar.
Well, this is an interesting answer for us Americans. He said, yes, to a certain extent you're right, but you have to see that the Portuguese form of colonization was a lot smoother, or I don't like the word smoother, softer or more gentle, although that seems too kind a word, softer than the North American brand that we know about, and I would say that even can be seen in the results to this day. But let me give it to him to say more.
Este suavizamento foi apenas na aparência, porque talvez tenha sido até mais cruel do que se possa imaginar.
In any case, what he's talking about, he thinks, was in appearances. It seemed to be softer, the relationship between blacks and whites, and the form of servitude, of slavery, seemed to be softer. But he says that underneath it could be possibly even worse, perhaps than our version, in its cruelties.
Num poema recente que eu escrevi e que Alex traduziu, eu falo dessa relação de abraçar com a mão no coldre.
Oh yeah, now I'm remembering it. A book I translated 2 years ago. It's a rhymed verse, and he talks about the white man who is embracing the black with his hand on his pistol.
Daí o imenso desnível social, econômico da comunidade negra para a comunidade branca.
In fact, there is undeniably a huge inequality socioeconomically between blacks and whites in Brazil.
E o número de genocídio entre os jovens, que são 70% dos que são assassinados em crime de assassinato de arma de fogo. 70%.
São negros. In Brazil, 70% of all kids, or I don't know what age he cut it off at, but all youngsters, 70% of all of them who die by gunfire are black.
Isso decorre do fato de, depois da abolição formal da escravatura, não ter havido nenhum cuidado com essa comunidade que ficava sem terra, sem herança, sem ter onde viver.
This springs from the fact that when abolition finally occurred, nobody in the government took any care to arrange for a new life for the people who had been slaves. And so there were no jobs, there was no education, there was nowhere to go, and there was no land given over to them. They simply were told, now you are free.
Mais de 100 anos depois, essa comunidade engrossa as grandes massas dos mais despossuídos, dos que têm menos recursos e, naturalmente, menos escolaridade.
Menos quê?
Escolaridade.
100 years later, namely today, or it's 130 years now, the vast majority of these people remain impoverished and with very little escolaridade, academic skills, or very little academic backgrounds.
Por esse motivo, minha poesia, embora não seja panfletária, não fale das coisas de uma forma direta, ela está cheia dessa carga de confrontos submersos e, às vezes, explícitos.
I should have said the word schooling, with very few recourses for schooling. So my poetry, for the most part, doesn't deal overtly with these issues, but the weight of these problems lies in and around and behind these poems, and sometimes is explicitly addressed.
Quando eu era criança, eu sempre procurava observar nos lugares de excelência, os lugares desejáveis, a presença de alguém que se parecesse comigo, algum negro que estivesse lá.
When I was young, I always was looking around for people in higher levels of society. I was always looking around to see if there were any blacks, and I really didn't see any.
O movimento Black Power americano alcançou a minha geração na pré-adolescência.
The American Black Power movement reached us in Brazil when I was in my adolescence.
Então, foi muito importante no sentido de afirmação, de ver negros ocupando lugares de excelência, de ver negro falando forte.
It was very important for us to be able to see blacks in a position of some power and speaking with strength.
Hoje já existem muitos negros com lugares de excelência no Brasil, da minha geração, ainda menos do que o que poderia, mas já há avanços nesse sentido.
He would say that now, today, there certainly have been some advances in this sense, and that there are people of his generation of color who are in higher positions. Though I believe he at the same time has told me, he didn't say this just now, but I think he's told me that there isn't a single black in the entire Congress of Brazil. Is that not right? O Congresso não tem nenhum? Quase não tem nenhum. Almost. Maybe it has one or two. So in terms of political power, you don't see blacks. And he made another point the other day, not here on the stage. He said, I've been living 45 years in Rio de Janeiro. I've never met a black doctor. So I think your question, I'm trying to fill out an answer, even though you didn't ask the question of me. Yeah.
No âmbito da poesia, talvez eu seja o único negro que tenha ganhado os prêmios que os brancos ganharam e que seja citado para e passos com eles, com os poetas gerais, não apenas com os poetas da área negra.
In Brazil, I'm probably the only black poet who has won all the prizes that all the white poets have won, and who is cited in the literature as a poet, simply as a poet, not in the little niche of black poetry. And by the way, I sure hope that we can agree that Kumanyaka, whom you mentioned, is in that realm in North America. I certainly look at him that way, and I hope you guys do too.
Quase sempre nos lugares onde houve esses eventos importantes dos brancos, eu sempre estava sozinho lá como negro.
When I go to a major poetical event in Brazil, I'm usually the only black there. It doesn't bother him too much, but he's observing it since you asked. Now, your second question really interests him, if you can remember now. You asked about the influence.
The influence, if there was influence from particularly African-American poets, like I said, Kulinyaka and Audre Lorde. One of your first quote readings reminded me of one of Lorde's poems, Kitchen Linoleum.
That's very interesting. Ela quer saber se você conhece a poesia de negro daqui, Audre Lorde, e de grande poeta americano, Joseph Kumanyaka, que estava na Guerra do Vietnã. Ou, se não, qual poetas de cor são interessantes para você de norte-americanos?
Dos de cor, eu conheço, lógico, eu conheci o Baraka, Amiri Baraka, sobre o qual se está escrevendo um livro de uma tese comparativa.
He mentions Amiri Baraka not just because it was a figure of importance for him, but because at this very moment somebody is writing a book in Brazil about Amiri Baraka's role in literary culture in the United States, comparing it with Salgado's role in Brazil. So, in fact, we're hoping when we get back to Newark to meet his son, who is now the mayor of Newark.
Yeah, we had Amiri Baraka here 20 years ago.
We had him in classroom. Did you attend? Yeah. Amiri Baraka.
Não, outro, o da Vietnã que eu me esqueci.
Oh, Joseph Kumanyaka.
E o Joseph Kumanyaka, já não conheço a obra dele, mas conheço o nome dele, a fama dele. E o primeiro poeta americano negro que eu conheci foi Langston Hughes.
The first, I do know the name Yusuf Kumanyaka, though I don't know his work. I have, of course, heard of him. However, the first poet the first Negro poet or black poet or African-American poet that I did hear of and read the poetry of was Langston Hughes. By the way, Langston Hughes actually refers to himself as a Negro poet, so don't be angry at me. I didn't know historically which term to use, and I'm so old that I have lived in the generation where all the different terms have been used, and one doesn't want to offend anybody, but look at the NAACP. Doesn't it still exist?
It's always generational.
Yeah, it's a generational thing. In other words, I'm an old fart, but this is a young guy, and he can handle it.
Tive uma grande alegria quando estive em Iowa. Lançamos o livro na Paris Lights e estava lá um painel com parece que Roberto não estava o Walt Whitman, o Walt Whitman e estava também Langston Hughes.
He said that when we gave a reading at Prairie Lights in Iowa City, he was very pleased to see on the wall a quote from Walt Whitman, and right next to it a quote by Langston Hughes.
Yeah. I have kind of I guess, a related question. How much of an influence is, because I know in some of your poems there have been mentions of elements that I think come from West Africa, spiritual elements, and I'm wondering how much of an influence is that on your writing and in the black population in Brazil.
Okay, wait. The first half of your question I understand, but when you ended with the words "and the black population," do you mean how does the black population influence him, or how were they influenced by Yoruba traditions?
Yes, the second.
Ok. Olha, ele quer saber quais são as influências da África, principalmente de Yoruba, mas de West Africa, na sua poesia e na vida de gente de gente afro-brasileiros.
Eu vou começar pelo fim. Na vida das pessoas comuns é grande a influência da África no Brasil. Da língua, às danças, à comida, a música, praticamente o que o Brasil tem para mostrar para fora vem da África.
I want to answer the second part of your question first. For the average person in Brazil, the African influence is enormous, and practically everything you see from Brazil, dance, music, food, almost all of it is either influenced by Africa or is directly from Africa.
Na minha poesia, no ritmo, no trato com as palavras e alguns elementos até do idioma iorubá, outro poema aparece.
In my poetry, the predominant influence from Africa, I would say, is the rhythmic influence, though occasionally there are images. There is one poem here where I spoke of the child God, but the term in Deus Erei. Onde foi o Deus Erei? You see, he has a reference. Somebody even was critical of my translation, which is fair enough, except that Deus Erei doesn't exist in our language or in our culture. And the Deus Erei is a figure of fun, but perhaps malicious fun, and it's a kind of a child god figure from the Yoruba culture in Africa. Now, a reader in Brazil knows who the Deus Erei is, but a reader in America doesn't know, and in fact, it's very hard to even track it down on Google. I mean, you've got to get it just right. There is a circumflex over the final E. I mean, I spent a long time trying to track this down. And then when you've tracked it down, how do you translate it? If you leave it, Deus Erei, then you need a footnote. And I really believe that if we can avoid footnotes in poetry, it's better. And so what I did was I kind of Europeanized the African god by saying that child god. Now, he is a child god, but I had in mind the malicious little pranks of Cupid, though I don't mention Cupid. And I do feel that they are analogous. Almost all cultures have very similar gods playing very similar roles. So I hope that I didn't do a cultural unfairness to the poem. The only alternative would have been just to say the Deus Erei, and leave the word perhaps in italics in Portuguese. The word Deus is Portuguese for God. The word Erei doesn't exist in any Portuguese dictionary by itself. It is only in the expression Deus Erei, and Erei is a Yoruba word, or a Yoruba derivation for this child God.
Também neste livro, Blood of the Sun, tem poema chamado Odu, que em Yorubá quer dizer destino.
Well, now, this is interesting. There's a poem in Blood of the Sun, Sol Sanguíneo, which is called Odu, and Odu in Yoruba means destiny. But I have to say that Salgado and I didn't discuss it as far as I can remember, and I left Odu as the title in this case. So maybe it sounds to me as if I'm being inconsistent, so allow me to quote Walt Whitman. Do I contradict myself? Well then, I contradict myself. And I believe Ralph Waldo Emerson said exactly the same thing, probably using many more words. And in this poem, Salgado does refer to a Yoruba rite in which the body of a person receiving a spirit, the spirit enters your living body and you speak with the voice of that spirit, that is referred to with a word from Yoruba, elegun. Elegun. And so in this case, I put it in italics and I kept the footnote. I just didn't know what to do. So at least I'm not saying there's any happy solution to what to do about Yoruba words, but your question was, does Yoruba and Western Africa appear in his poetry and influence it? And these are just a few examples of where it does appear. Oh, he wants me to read the poem. In the body of the Elegun, the gods descend to supplicating blood. They return to the salt of the living. The gods in their incorporeal mists. They return from a secret countryside of non-time. In the void of formlessness, drums beat out the shadow's voice. And I hope you notice that drums have been important in a number of these poems. So I think that partly answers your question as well. And if you guys go to Brazil, drums are really important. And I have to say, I guess this is, again, it'll make me sound like an old white, what are we called? I'm a dead white male, practically. But I have to say that the average Brazilian has such a better sense of rhythm than we do. One is so envious. One hears people tapping just on a tabletop in a way I could never tap. And I think that influence came to Brazil from Africa. Just a wonderful sense of rhythm, a closeness to the life of rhythm that is much harder for us in our Eurocentric white world to be open to. Anybody else? Did we answer the Western Africa Yoruba question and yours as well? Yeah.
Yeah, because I think in Brazil they call it candomblé.
Candomblé.
Yeah, and in Jamaica we vodun and.
Esse poema vem do candomblé de linha Jeje.
The poem I just read in English came from Candomblé, from the linha Jeje, but you'll have to ask him afterwards what that is. I think in that realm, the only stuff we really have in America is mostly in New Orleans. And most of us don't know too much about it.
I was just thinking when he was answering the question earlier about how the colonialism in Brazil looked more gentle. In so many ways, as I was reading this poetry, and particularly as I was listening to what we read aloud today, there's cat imagery everywhere. And for me, that's so poignant and eloquent for many reasons, but one of which is that it's got that perfect tension between something that has the potential to be this really loving, sweet, domesticated companion, and sort of this monster that can really get you. And as somebody who works a lot with minority rhetorics, as I was listening to him answer that, there's a way in which that cat could really represent the colonialists, right?
Really
and their...
Ele quer saber. Let me translate it before you go on, because I'm going to lose. É muito interessante que ela diz, esta imagem do gato, que é muito suave, é bonita, mas tem unhas, não pode ser uma representação de colonização também?
But on the other side of that, it could also be the minority voice, right? Think about Black Panthers, for example, right? And the reappropriation of that symbol and that metaphor. So I just wondered if you could talk a little
Mas
bit
ela
about
diz no outro lado, que pode ser ligado com a Black Pantera, que é uma Pantera Negra, que é uma apropriação desta imagem de gato, no outro lado, que eles têm unhas também.
O que é interessante nessa imagem é a sua ambivalência.
Well, the interesting thing about that image or that metaphor is its ambivalence. It can go either way, and you've made that even deeper by showing us two different ways. It could be the colonizer or colonization itself, but it also could be the fighting back.
Right, because the assumption is that the people aren't going to fight back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Por isso é que a imagem, o gato foi escolhido. Mas funciona também para essa história da colonização a nossa. Porque o português escravizava a mulher negra durante o dia e dormia com ela à noite.
Okay, but I don't know where he's headed. He said, well, a nossa que? Yeah. The Portuguese made a slave of the woman in the daytime and went to bed with her at night. I'm not sure where he's heading, and I want to say that the Americans did the same thing, only they were deeply ashamed and their wives were furious at them, whereas the Portuguese, within a Catholic culture, they could always go to confession, and their wives weren't that furious, and when the children were born, they actually taught them to read and write. And in America, it was illegal to teach a slave to read and write, even if it was your own child. And what did you do? You sold them up the river or down the river to Mississippi, so your wife would stop hating you for having begotten this child. And in Brazil, it was the opposite. The child stayed right there on the plantation, and very often, or perhaps always, was given its freedom in the will, in the owner's will. I'm not saying this is a paradise, but it's a noticeable difference between North America. And I think it springs from a noticeable difference towards sexuality, which here in North America we're constantly denying the very existence of it. And it makes it hard to lead an authentic life when we don't want to acknowledge that, amongst other things, we are sexual creatures. But that's another story, I guess.
E isso se encaixa na situação do gato, que é uma coisa aqui na suavidade, e na suavidade está me roubando, me tirando meus direitos, e passando a ideia de que somos amigos.
Yeah, so he continued with this imagery. So you have this friendship. We put our arm around the guy's shoulder, but we're taking away his rights at the same time.
O Brasil foi o último país a abolir o tráfico. 50 anos depois da Inglaterra ter condenado, o Brasil continuou trazendo negros.
Brazil was still accepting black slaves 50 years after England declared the slave trade illegal and slavery illegal.
Então, essa coisa suave e tal, e malemolente, mas aquele que não tem nada continua a não ter.
So there might have been an apparent gentleness or softness in the behavior or the external treatment, but the one who had nothing continued to have nothing.
Não estou falando mal do meu país, que eu amo, mas eu estou apenas fazendo uma análise sincera da conjuntura histórica da escravidão.
I'm not too happy speaking ill of my country because I love my country, but I'm trying to tell it the way it is so we get a better historical view of how things are. I, on the contrary, am happy to speak ill of my country, and I think we all should be ashamed of what America's role, not just domestically, but internationally has been throughout my lifetime. The last time we did a good thing, if you could call it a good thing, internationally was to help defeat Hitler. And since then, I've lived in a world where almost all of our aggressions are only for our own good, and all morality seems to have disappeared. Now I'm going to get arrested.
Pergunta se alguém quer.
Did you have something? Oh, did you have something further to comment or ask?
No, I thought he was asking if he answered the question. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, você já respondeu.
Eu vou falar português e vou inglês.
I'm going to speak in Portuguese and you can translate.
Eu vou tentar. Muito obrigada, Salgado. A sua poesia é bela e muito profunda, uma inteligência profunda.
There's a deep intelligence in your poetry. I want to praise you for that.
E tenho aberto o desejo de perguntar como começou você como escritor, a seu impulso e no contexto do Brasil, que a gente tem falado, como que você achou seu destino?
How did you find your destiny? How did you become a poet within the context of your life in Brazil? Você entendeu?
Eu sou um ET. Eu sou um ET.
Isso aqui?
Um ET.
ET. Oh, yes. I'm an ET. You know, woo, riding the bicycle in the sky. Yeah.
Porque de onde eu saí, ninguém saiu.
Because what I got out of, nobody got out of that.
Então eu fiz um caminho próprio, escolhido todas as escolhas, desde o que eu queria ler, desde que ninguém me mandou fazer. Eu fiz porque eu próprio optei por meu caminho.
What I did to get out of all that was my own doing, and I opted, although he did credit his mother for wanting to become educated. She had no letters, she was illiterate, but she wanted him to become not only literate, a cultured person. And she always said to him, knowledge is the most important thing. So let's give her some credit. But meanwhile, he was just saying, I did all this on my own, because all the people he grew up with didn't really get out of that town. He got out, yeah.
Tendo saído da região rural, onde não havia nada de escola, médicos, padres, policial, juiz, nada disso existia. E, tendo sido alfabetizado aos 15 anos, não era para mim seguir esse caminho tão sofisticado da poesia.
Não ia?
Não era para que eu seguisse esse caminho tão sofisticado da poesia.
Mas você fez?
Mas eu vou continuar.
So coming from this world where there were no school teachers, no priests, no lawyers, he didn't say lawyers, but no doctors, no judges, no policemen, all the social structure we're used to, none of it existed there. It wasn't likely that he would ever follow a path to poetry.
Mas eu tinha uma mãe muito ousada, muito... aqui no Brasil se diz abusada, muito que faz as coisas que ninguém faz.
But I had a mom who was, well, I'll summarize what he said. I had a mom who was one tough cookie. And she was very courageous, and she did things nobody would think you could do.
Então eu saí para essa coisa. Eu, ao invés de trabalhar apenas para viver do estômago para baixo, da sobrevivência básica, eu fui fazer uma coisa absolutamente sofisticada, de vanguarda, que em termos naturais não seria um caminho de uma pessoa que veio de onde eu vim.
Instead of living my life just to feed my belly, which would have been the normal thing to do given my origins, I in fact followed a path with the avant-garde in poetry that is completely unexpected and doesn't seem to follow naturally from my origins.
Mas eu saí aos 15 anos do interior para começar a vida urbana, de estudos, enfim, de leituras, e 4 anos depois eu já era um dos jovens mais famosos da minha cidade.
Teresina. I left my village at the age of 15, came to a capital city, Teresina. I learned to read and write. I went through 12 years of school in 3 years. I spent all my time in the library, and by the time I was 19, I was the most famous young intellectual in Teresina.
Aí fui para o Rio de Janeiro, onde estavam os grandes artistas do país e escritores. E lá também eu cheguei e ocupei meu espaço muito cedo.
He was then advised to go to Rio de Janeiro by an older poet, Torquato Neto, who was violently against the dictatorship and ended up killing himself because he was so adamantly idealistic, and everybody else kind of weakened their position in order to survive, and he wouldn't weaken his position, and he was constantly harassed by the police, and he killed himself. And his widow just died last week for no reason at all, just a week ago, because the hospitals in Brazil aren't very good, but that's beyond this story. In any case, Torquato Neto said to him, a crazy guy like you got to go down to Rio de Janeiro. So he went to Rio de Janeiro, where he very quickly found other intellectuals and found a place for himself in the cultural milieu that he's belonged to ever since.
Então, com 24 anos, eu estava numa universidade. Essa universidade até tem uma parceria com a Brown University, a PUC, do Rio. Eu estudava comunicação e meus poemas eram dados como monografia para os que se formavam em letras.
Como monografia?
Monografia. De curso de conclusão.
So at the age of 24, I found myself at PUC, which is the Catholic University in Rio de Janeiro, which has an exchange program with Brown in Rhode Island, Brown University. And I was a student there for a year and a half before I quit. And while I was a student there, they were already using my poems in the classroom. I think that's why he quit. He figured if they're using me for a text, why do I have to study here?
Foi assim a minha caminhada. Nunca parei, estou sempre seguindo aquilo que eu iniciei, que eu desejei e fui à luta. Não é uma coisa, não é um caminho fácil. Mas se fosse fácil, todo mundo tinha.
And so I went along my way and continued to follow what I wanted, to be a poet. And it wasn't easy. It was never easy. It's always a battle. And if it weren't a battle, everybody would do it.
Tá, muito obrigado.
What was the book? Was there a first book that really inspired you to write?
Sim, eu queria saber que livro foi a primeira que influenciou para você para escrever a Fernando Pessoa.
O livro que me botou para frente para escrever foi justamente um livro de Fernando Pessoa que eu li numa biblioteca pública.
The thing that really gave him that kick towards writing that you ask about was a book by Fernando Pessoa that he encountered in the public library, and he is very fond of quoting it, and the quote is so difficult that I just blanch with fear every time he says it. So don't ask him to go on, because I can't translate it. It's a difficult poem about thought, and you know, Fernando Pessoa is like the Borges of Portugal, very intellectual, very introspective, and I have spent my life not translating Fernando Pessoa. So I hope he won't read it. If he reads it, I'm not going to translate it.
É curioso que eu trabalhava vendendo produtos na rua para sobreviver. E eu fugia do trabalho e eu lia Fernando Pessoa. O que era? Eu não podia nunca falar isso em casa.
He was earning a living being a door-to-door salesman. And he would just drop all his products somewhere under a tree and sit down and read Fernando Pessoa. But he couldn't tell them that back home.
Mas se eu não tivesse feito isso, eu não estava aqui agora.
But if he hadn't done this, unfaithfulness to the family, because he's supposed to be earning some money selling these products, he wouldn't be here today as a poet.
Okay.
Oh yes, please.
This may be too big a question, though. So, becoming literate at 16?
Começando a ler com 15 anos.
Can you describe that experience? What the connection you made with the written word and
Como foi que você estabeleceu uma ligação com a palavra escrita com 15 anos, de repente assim? Como foi?
A palavra já estava na minha vida desde dos repentistas.
The word was already part of my life since I heard as a child those repentistas, those traveling troubadours who came to our village now and then.
Quando eu fui para Teresina e que eu descobri o texto escrito e que eu pude ler, minha referência era a poesia. Por isso eu fui para a biblioteca buscar a poesia, porque eu só entendia que o discurso que existia para mim era o discurso poético.
When he discovered the library in Teresina and started hanging out there and discovered the poetry section of the library, he was encountering his future path. He was encountering his future as a poet, which he thinks the seeds had already been planted by the repentistas who came to his town with their rhymed verse and song.
Eu costumo dizer que não importa o tempo cronológico na realização de um projeto. O que importa é o tempo produtivo, o tempo concentrado, em que você é pura entrega.
I like to say that the amount of time you spend on a project isn't the issue. The real issue is how much time you spend giving yourself to the project, dedicating yourself to it, immersing yourself in it.
O tempo de uma pessoa que fica debaixo de uma marquise ou de uma árvore e não faz nada durante a vida, é o tempo cronológico. Mas o tempo de uma pessoa que tem pouco tempo para realizar alguma coisa, se ele for inteiro entregue, ele realiza alguma tarefa superior.
A person can spend a whole lifetime just lying under a tree, and that's chronological time. But if you are working hard on a project that you totally dedicate yourself to, even if it's achieved in a short amount of time, and even if you're given only a short amount of time, that is used time. O tempo que utilizado. Concentrado. It's concentrated time. And I think, though he didn't say it, I think he would like to say it's realized time.
Okay?
Una más? I have just one more question. Where does a poem begin for you?
Where does what?
Where does a poem begin? What is the impulse? Images, sounds.
Sounds good.
Where do you begin?
So this is a good question. I have to translate for him. De onde começa o poema? Com imagem, com sonido, com ritmo? Onde é o semente de poema?
Começa de qualquer lado. Pode ser no ritmo, pode ser nos momentos altos de uma conversa. De repente ele chega e às vezes quando chega que eu percebo que a poesia já está em mim.
In fact, the inspiration for a poem can come from any direction. It can come from a rhythm, it can come from a phrase, it can come from some high point in the midst of a conversation you had with somebody. And when it hits you, the poem coalesces around whatever it is that first buried itself in you. Huh?
Thank you. Muito obrigado.